So this week, I'd like to start by reading some definitions. Um, Today's episode is going to be about a teacher who wandered the Middle East some centuries ago by the name of Yeshua. Some call him Jesus Christ. And I feel that a lot of what we've been seeing in the news has been justified in his name
Mhm.
when I'm not quite so sure it lines up with his actual teachings. So I
Mhm.
thought we'd do an investigation this week and just
Mm.
compare. I want to start by reading a definition, and I know you spent a lot of time studying the teachings of Jesus Christ earlier in your life.
Mhm.
So I want you to weigh in as the authority. I'm going to read it,
Mhm.
two descriptions, and you tell me which one fits his personality best the way you imagine it from
Mhm.
having studied his life and his works. Definition A, personality A. Willing to respect or accept different behavior or opinions that may differ from one's own, open to new ideas, relating easily to others, and leaning towards a social philosophy that promotes individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise, often associated with words such as tolerant, unprejudiced, giving, unbigoted. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's personality A.
Mhm.
Personality B, averse to change,
Mm.
closed to new ideas or innovation, invested in upholding the status quo, often at any cost. Similar words, a traditionalist. Personality B. Which would you say best fits Jesus Christ?
Personality A.
Personality A was the definition of the words liberal, progressive, and woke. Personality B was a conservative. So I hate to break it to you guys. I think Jesus was woke.
Welcome to a new paradigm, a new way of being, free from shame, self-limitation, or cultural programming. Welcome to a new you, a new world full of endless possibilities. Welcome to your Tantric awakening.
Welcome to the Tantric Awakening podcast. I'm Andre,
And I'm Kendall.
and we might have shocked you with that introduction, but that's okay. Because one of the things that Tantra teaches you how to do is to experience things for yourself
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily rely on the past. For
Mm.
guidance, maybe. For some warning, maybe. But really, Tantra teaches you to forge your own path. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So by nature, you challenge everything, you question it.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you don't have to believe in it. You grow from your own direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's the nature of the show to question things. And I'm approaching this with an open mind, just looking to compare some notes. What I see today, what is written down as being taught back then.
Yeah.
Are they in alignment? You know, an investigation, a comparison of sorts. And, you know, by those definitions that we read in the introduction, you could conclude that certainly he leaned a little more left than right. He believed in free healthcare. He believed in feeding the poor. He believed in welcoming foreigners as your own. So it's the exact opposite. But I think as we dig in, you'll find that this even transcends labels like left or right, liberal or conservative. It's just that I guess increasingly we see words like liberal being used in a derogatory sense. Oh, that liberal. Willing to respect or accept the behavior of others, open to new ideas. Like, when did that become a bad thing? Promoting civil liberties, democracy, free enterprise. That seems like what America used to stand for. You know, But if we go into the core of what Yeshua taught in his day, I think it transcends left or right. It transcends politics. He stood against politics, from what I can tell. He
Mm.
even stood against, and this might shock you, the church of the time. He was not a Christian. Christianity rose up in his name long after he left us.
Mm-hmm.
He studied with the Essenes. He studied Gnosticism, if you want to look at what inspired him. And one of the things he taught was the lack of separation, which he saw the state of the time and the church of the time doing. The famous scene of him overturning the tables, the one time where we see him really losing his cool and getting angry, was outside a temple. He was challenging the conventional norms. I mean, he was the original mystic, the original tantric from my point of view, because he dared challenge the status quo of the time, the beliefs of the time.
Right now, there is a revolution happening. People are waking up. People are waking up to the reality of control, fear-mongering, and even the government suppressing people's freedoms. And I don't know about you guys, and I don't know about you, but this has been really alarming for so many, and even for us. And yet we're here inviting you into a sanctuary where you can learn about how we came to terms with Jesus and this term of wokeness and how it relates to rising and becoming the observer to all of this. Because I don't know about you guys, but this seems like a movie that has just gone in a wrong direction. And in this show today, we're going to talk about, how you can maintain peace in this scene of history, really.
Like, I know a lot of this extra history that's left out of the traditional Roman teachings that are passed down to us. Even growing up in the church, some of it was new to you. But I think like some of it kind of validated what you felt intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if you could speak into your experience learning about the man, his teachings, like growing up, and then like your own investigation since, and have they shifted? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up going to church, like a Christian church, non-denominational. I was in a preschool where we were learning about the stories of Jesus, and in our classrooms. And I would be going to school and then going to church. And I grew up involved in like the elementary ministry, the teenager high school ministry. And that journey extended itself to then college and even post-college. So my journey around Jesus has definitely evolved. I mean, as a kid, you were just absorbing information. I wasn't critically thinking of like, is this right or wrong? Because that's what you're doing. You're doing from 0 to 7. You are literally a sponge absorbing your environment. So my discernment wasn't like, oh, like this is wrong, or I wasn't challenging that. So my journey into my like high school years, for example, I was going to like the high school ministry. I was involved in that, and my journey was very much of a devotion. I saw it as a way to be a good person, like a way to learn things about being a human, and things did resonate for me at the time. It was something I went to, but also during my high school years, I wasn't always going every week because I was so involved in my dance competition world. I was going to school and dance studio. But my journey evolved into, after I graduated high school, I went to a private Christian university. So I really felt a desire to continue following Jesus, continue following the church as a devotional practice, because I don't even say I use it as a devotional practice when I was that age, but it just felt like a natural next step. So when I went to a private Christian university, yeah, I allowed myself to get involved in programs like Campus Crusades for Christ, which is a very much an outreach ministry, very much connected to getting to know Jesus in a deeper way, staying pure during college. I would join a bunch of like Bible studies. I remember just it being a part of my world, and my awakening around, I would say, leaving my Christianity world was more so when I was stepping into my womanhood and asking those questions. And I was really wanting to understand my sacred sexuality.
Well, interesting that that's when the questions started arising. Backing up to what you said, you mentioned you were learning about the teachings of Jesus and the importance of purity. So Jesus taught purity. In which passage?
I don't know.
Because that's one example where things get attributed to him that might be the moral standards of the time that some are looking to push through. But they're attributing that to his teachings when I don't remember any certain sermon about thou shalt not toucheth anyone aroundeth you. Do not leaneth too closeth when you huggeth.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely say when it comes to the word purity and how it relates to purity culture, it wasn't necessarily expressed in the essence of purity that you're not allowed to hug. But when I did get into more of my like mid-20s and I was in ministry school, going to Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, this purity culture became more evident because of how the conversation around relationships and sexuality was being presented. And I can very clearly remember, even during my time at BSSM, which is Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, during Sexuality Week, where one of the sermons from the main pastor of the school, 𝗧𝘁𝗍𝗲, was basically showing people how to hug. And it made me really feel odd. It felt uncomfortable because he was basically demonstrating to the collective 2,000 of us in our school the importance of like knowing how to hug, because he was basically alluding to that if you hug front to front, female to man, your breasts are touching that person and it could cause them to feel all these feelings.
Oh my.
And yeah, this was also the same guy during the ministry school where he would consistently throughout it encourage everyone to like hold hands during school. And like, if you like the person next to you, squeeze the hand of the person next to you. And
that's kind of creepy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was interesting for sure. And I definitely woke up from that on my drive home when I decided, after dropping out of second year, I was like, I think it was first year where I was just like, something's off. I like had this conversation with myself on this long road trip down to Southern California. I was like, something's really off and I can't put my finger on it. And then it made this conversation he had came up for me. And then I started, at the time I was actually on this road trip listening to, what's his name? He's a very famous male author, 𝗷𝗍𝗪. And I was listening to his book about intimacy, and somehow in that road trip, it was made really clear of like, oh, like this is intimacy. This is what it means to have intimacy skills. and, you know, how it relates to me being in my own womanhood or asking myself these questions, is I came to the stark realization that I had not really experienced much sacred touch, physical touch. I was very closed off to that. And I don't know if it was from a lack of desire, but because of abstinence education, when you're avoiding a conversation, even in the conversation with your own self, your own body, that can be really revealing. It can be really revealing.
Well, I wanted to ask, I mean, you said this was all part of an event called Sexuality Week.
Yeah, where they take the whole week to talk about these conversations. Yeah, these topics around love and sex, everything that everyone's kind of like afraid to talk
Basically
about.
about not having sex.
Yeah, there's no like advocacy to have sex. The conversation was very much around, you know, you wait until marriage to have sex because sex is a very sacred experience. So, yeah. I mean, during this time is when I was also really connecting with a particular guy at the time that I was just like, oh my gosh, like all these feelings, and I was wanting more. And I felt more feelings coming online, more like wanting to flirt. Like it was just so pure from the heart. And this particular person was, you know, very expressing himself as like this dark, edgy kind of guy, like on his Instagram. And I was just like, I very much was close to him. But yeah, I was like coming up against these roadblocks of like, why are all these beautiful people? I mean, at the time we were mid-20s or early 30s. It's like, why are all these people like, why isn't a lot of people dating? Or like, there's a lot of resistance. And that's when when I started second year, I ended up dropping out because it was just like the desire to know my womanly essence and my sexuality was stronger. And I was really just tired of the shaming and just knew something was different, knew something that was on the horizon.
I know an 82-year-old man who, I think around that time, 25, 26, somewhere, he said he was finishing up college.
Yeah.
Tried to get intimate with a girl that he had been dating for a while. I don't think they were married, but they were seriously dating for a while. And they started exploring each other. And he felt so uncomfortable and felt so much shame that he never married, never had children, never dated or touched or looked at a woman his whole life.
Yeah, that's what they teach a lot of men.
And he knows couples who are married who don't know what the heck to do with each other when they're alone at night and feel so awkward about it, not just at night, but throughout their day.
Yeah.
Like married couples really that have a hard time talking to each other about what they're both feeling. And this feels like it's doing more harm than good. I can't believe Yeshua was teaching this. And if he was, they forgot to record it, because I can't think of any passages where he's advocating purity culture. In fact, it's not even, I mean, sexuality is alluded to in Genesis, of course. It's not attributed to a saying of Jesus, but it's alluded to in Genesis. And the only thing it says is they were naked in the garden together and they were unashamed.
Yeah.
That's Genesis 2:25, if anybody wants to look it up. They were naked in the garden together and they knew no shame.
I can honestly...
You're supposed to be ashamed if you hug somebody the wrong way or too long.
Yeah.
And this really what it comes down to, like, I mean, you were ministry program. I'm an ordained minister. Like, we've spent time studying this stuff. And then there's like you said, there's like a point where like your spidey sense starts tingling and your body tells you something doesn't feel right. It's almost like when I read the Bible, it's like there's two different voices in there. There's maybe stuff that was recorded by observers at the time, some of the sermons they overheard and things like that. And then there's the Roman state. We know all the bishops got together and had the Council of Nicaea, you know, where they pretty much decided which gospels go in the Bible and which don't. They worked for Emperor Constantine. This was the Roman state. This was the state that arrested Jesus Christ. They compiled the stories and decided what goes into our version.
Yeah, can you unpack that a little bit? Because I know in my journey when I began deconstructing, like I had no idea about the Essenes and the fact that they decided to selectively put in various books. Can you describe that and why that actually happened?
Well, that's just it. The Council of Nicaea, we're talking 325 AD.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 300 years, several generations after, the historical Yeshua walked the earth. So it was hearsay passed down to hearsay, passed down to hearsay, passed down to hearsay. And it was the Emperor Constantine, who in Christian traditions, they will tell you he was so inspired by the word of God that he converted, that he gave up his evil Roman ways and became a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think the way the story more went was he was really frustrated as emperor. 300 years now we've been feeding these Christians to lions, and they're only growing in number, not shrinking. We need to do something about this growing religion before it challenges the state for dominance. Why don't we make it the official state religion, but we'll rewrite it and give them our version of it? And this was essentially the Council of Nicaea. They decided which stories are going in. And then, the monks at the time, they saw the writing on the wall. They knew what was happening. Usually when a power like that takes over, the next thing they start doing is they start burning books and rewriting history and telling libraries what they can and can't publish. That's usually what follows next. They knew what was coming. They took their treasured scrolls and they put them in jars and they buried them in the earth. And we found some of them at Nag-Hammadi, and we found some of them in the cave next to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they have some other gospels written by other apostles. There was more than 4. The Gospel of Thomas is a great place to start. These are what are known as the Gnostic Gospels because Christianity didn't exist in Jesus' time. Jesus was not a Christian any more than Buddha was a Buddhist. Right? He was a Gnostic who studied mysticism with a group of mystics known as the Essenes. So if you really want to get at the core of who he was and what he taught, you look at Gnosticism, you look at the Essenes that he was studying with. There's also, there's some missing years from the Bible, and it's widely speculated that he was in India and Tibet. And he was in Buddhist monasteries learning the Eastern traditions as well. That's why when you strip away the Roman language, the language of the state, there is some purity in there. There are some good lessons in there. And those parts line up with all the other traditions of the world. And suddenly Christianity doesn't feel so separate from. Something else Jesus taught was not to judge. And yet here we are, everybody who doesn't believe the way we do is going to hell. Do you see how there's this voice that shames you and diminishes you and seeks to control you or else? And then there's this voice trying to lift you up. The kingdom of heaven is within. No, there's no way to the kingdom except through me.
Yeah.
There's 2 different voices. And after a while, you start being able to separate them. And this goes for any guru, any spiritual teacher whose works you're considering reading. Is it about you and empowerment, or is it about them and a certain way of doing things?
Yeah.
And that's what's at the core of it, I think.
Yeah, I really agree. Since I've started my deconstruction journey back in before even 2022, it's been a journey unfolding like layer by layer, but like during COVID, it really was exposed to me. Yeah, the unraveling of that whole process was really coming to terms with that. What you just said of having the audacity truly to critically think, to really ask deeper questions and challenge what I was learning, and also being like, well, why is this not being talked about? And then if I didn't find it in the Bible, I would go research about it. And I really am grateful. It's very much my Sagittarius energy. I'm like a very passionate learner. And the more I gave myself the opportunity to learn from people that are, different than me, or maybe know something that's like challenges what I know. Like I brought that in. I began to welcome it. And to me, that is the journey of self awakening. Really, if you coming to terms with, like, I think the God of the Bible has become this very like authoritarian God, and very like, it's very obedience oriented.
Exactly.
And with that whole obedience orientation, for example, if we're talking about sexuality, the obedience orientation to sexuality in the name of purity culture, under the hood in the nervous system and in the whole person, can really lead to bitterness and frustration, because your natural humanity has urges, and these urges in the Christian language can be seen as like, oh, like those are temptation, like don't give in to temptation. But really it's natural. Your hormones are shifting and you're ovulating, and yeah, you're feeling horny. You know what I mean?
So you've made a natural process something sinful and evil.
Yeah. And it gets exhausting. And I think that's where there's so many people that, like myself, are doing the inner work, that have been unraveling, unconditioning themselves to really, honestly, like learn to live, not even just like apart, but live from your own sense of, this is my truth, and this is my truth because, and it's not because I need something outside of myself to validate it. It's because, no, this is my truth. This is what is true to me. And I'm not needing to people please my pastor. I'm not needing to conform or be in a box, because so many people have been in these boxes for so many years. I mean, even since me leaving Christianity, I realized like I love love, and I think love looks like many things. And I also recognize, like, I've explored my bisexuality as well. Like, I've also been able to go beyond what is expected of me and just really understand me. And that can be a challenge to the institution, especially if you are challenging this really old doctrine that was created, like you mentioned, by the Romans, and they have this like projection of what is essentially mind control. And yeah, there's so much to it. This is like a very personal thing for me, but I'm really glad we're talking about this, because especially with this time we're in, like more than ever, I'm challenged, because it's been such an initiation of, honestly, like a death and rebirth. I mean, it's similar to like how Jesus went, he died and rose again. Like this is my own rising from what I knew. And it's been a journey. It's been wild. Yeah.
Well, you just said it. It boxed you in. It kept you from knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the point. Divide and conquer. Okay, we know this adage, right? So they divide us according to race, according to religion, according to economic status, according to education, according to sexual preference, according to gender. What else can we think of? Favorite TV shows? I remember in high school, we divided each other based on the music we listened to, and we judged others because they listened to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Divide and conquer. So nobody will ever rise against you. It's totally controlled. That's the Roman state. Okay? But the ultimate divide and conquer, my dear, dividing you from yourself. Now your own natural urges are suddenly a sin. Now you're judging. They don't have to shame you. Now you're judging and shaming yourself, and they know you will, because it's a natural process. Everybody goes through puberty.
Mm-hmm.
They know it's inevitable. They set you up to basically limit yourself. In Thailand and India, those elephant rides you get to go on, the way they train those elephants is when those elephants are babies, they tie their leg to a post. So the elephant knows it can only go so far from the leash, from its controller, from its master. As the elephant gets bigger and bigger, it could obviously break the rope pretty easily.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even try. And eventually they take the rope off. They don't need the rope because the elephant is only trained to go out so far.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, that's exactly what they do to us when, the parts that did survive, they were in the garden together and they knew no shame. That was not the original sin. It wasn't their bodies. It wasn't their natural sexual urges.
Mm-hmm.
The original sin was eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which, by the way, the fruit was suggested to them by a serpent, which is a symbol of the divine feminine. There's a whole thing there, too, of gender shaming. But it was eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. That was the actual sin. The knowledge was of good and evil. Knowledge of good and evil. That was the original sin, which brings me to judgment. The original sin was judgment. Judging something as good and something else that's different as evil. To be overcome. Judgment was the original sin. Let's keep that in mind when we think of like the typical Christian fundamentalist, Christian nationalist today. And I'll say it, so many of the MAGA cult. It's all about judgment, when that was actually the original sin. I actually have the passage. Do not judge or you will be judged, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. Matthew 7:1. That was the original sin. And instead, they teach us to judge ourselves. What a mind fuck. Right? They don't even have to judge us or us judge others. They ingrain it to us, just like the elephant on the rope, to be in constant judgment of ourselves. So, of course, you felt constrained. That was the point. It kept you from self-discovery, self-evolution, self-growth. That's the point. Because you go from one little box to the next little box, the next little cubicle, like that's the point. You don't make much waves. You don't rock the boat. So what changed that for you? Where did it begin to shift? Because I think this is what would be inspiring to so many others that find themselves in the place. Like, how did you get yourself out of that? Or how did you even realize you had to?
It was like a slow burn, burning away of what I knew and stepping into the new. And I definitely want to speak into this archetype. And speaking of the Garden of Eden, I truly believe it was like an energy of my inner Lilith coming online, because Lilith represents the snake in the Garden of Eden, and Lilith represents the dark feminine, the rebellion, the part of the psyche for all of us.
The ones who don't obey and conform, you mean?
Yeah. She, Lilith, it's like she did not want to give her power away. And yeah, I've even, heard this as well, like Eve herself is very much a representation of the energy of the priestess, which is very much the energy of like holding space. But I've had this theory that both of them talk with each other. And I do believe, in response to the question that you mentioned, I feel like my Lilith was coming online because naturally there was a desire to explore my sexuality. I mean, simple terms, like I wanted to explore sex. I also had this question to myself, like, what if I don't want to get married? And it was a very strong download of like, well, what if I don't? Does this mean I'm not going to be able to explore my sexuality? What does that mean? Because not everyone wants to, and so that really confronted me. And the more I understood that, the more I was like, well, if I do decide to get married, if I want to, like that could be 10, 20 years from now. Like I just started to have that dialogue with myself, and that dialogue led me to explore my sexual energy and to like unapologetically like masturbate, love my body, look at myself in the mirror naked. Like I was doing things which seemed so sinful to do and did them anyways. Like I remember when I ordered my first yoni egg.
Good for you.
I remember, which if you don't know what a yoni egg, it's a crystal essentially in an egg form, which the egg represents the divine feminine, and it can help to help build your pelvic floor, which enhances your intimacy and really can activate you. And so what I started to do was like start taking courses from women that or had already like left Christianity. And so like there was like a one woman, I think her name was like Morgan Cecile, pretty sure that's her name. And I think she taught me about like sacred sexuality and like the yoni egg. So that's when I bought the yoni egg. And then also that's around the time where, yeah, I was just exploring, like making this a practice. So my sexuality is honestly what inspired me to go down this path. And one thing led to the other, because the more I awakened to my sexual energy, the more powerful I felt, the more confident I felt. I was like, ooh, like this feels good. It feels good to know my body. It feels good to just be in touch with my body. And I know we've talked about this before as well, but I didn't have my like first conscious orgasm until 21. And when I had my first orgasm, I was actually in London at the time, but I remember being like, what is this? And so honestly, that period was like the shadow period to me really officially leaving. It was like the Saturn square, which happens before the Saturn return, where your life kind of shifts and takes a turn into another direction. So yeah, I knew that first orgasm was like, this is God in my body. Whoa, I don't have to disassociate from this anymore. And especially too, I wanted to mention with my dance background and career that I've been dancing since I was 3 years old and I'm 32 now, like it was really a wake-up call to recognize that, oh my gosh, I use my body to dance, yet I'm not connected to my body. It was like an eye-opener for me of like, ooh. And yeah, so.
You experienced orgasm. Orgasm is a frequency of energy.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this is actually a very tantric view. There's a reason they suppress sexuality, because it is the fastest way to self-awareness and awakening. Conscious sexuality is the fastest way there is to experience and learn about energy and learn to work with energy, which is essentially Tantra, energy work. Okay, they say Tantra is all about sex. Tantra is actually all about energy. Sex done correctly can make you aware of energy, sure. Energy applied correctly can make sex a lot more delightful, sure. But the focus is the energy.
Yeah.
The movement of energy. And, if you become enlightened, you no longer need them anymore as the middleman. And here's the two voices. Okay. There's I'll say it, fragile ego narcissistic God who goes on a rampage and kills and levels and burns down entire cities if somebody forgets to worship him for a moment. Right? And then there's source energy. You say you did what they told you not to do and you found God. And instead of reading about him personified as a man, versus feeling that oneness with all life through your connection to energy, connecting to the divine within you and all around you.
Yeah.
That's the other version of God, what we sometimes call source energy, which was here before creation, before the Big Bang. There's a point at which physics and religion do not disagree. You see?
Yeah.
I can't help but think, but the first version is just like a stand-in for the Roman state. Now they've elevated themselves to God status, and thou shalt obey and not even question our word.
Yeah. I'd like to get a little bit more unhinged, because there's a difference between resourcefulness and outsourcing.
Okay.
And there's a difference between recognizing your own energy body and then you giving your power away and trying to get that from outside of yourself. And so there's a time and a place to like extend and ask for help and like seek spiritual insight and like an advisor, a shaman, etc., coach, like how we are. But at the end of the day, the path of awakening and knowing your power is really coming into your awareness of your embodiment, right? Knowing that spirituality and sexuality can coexist and they are not one or the other, which that is what the church at large is still trying to do.
Well, not even coexist. They're essential. One cannot exist without the other. But that's just it. That's spirituality. They don't want you finding spirituality. They want you to continue seeking it because then you need them.
Yeah. I mean, that's also it's really interesting because in resourcing from within, like really going within myself to be with myself, be with my emotions, be with the human experience, I've learned to find my own voice. And that is a huge byproduct of leaving institutions like Christianity. Like, I truly found my voice. I found the strength to find it. And when you're not connected to your voice, when you're not connected to your truth, and you are essentially, for example, reading something and then not taking time to contemplate and like even apply it to see if it's true for you, like you are essentially just absorbing information. And that's what impacts the creatrix in you from arising. Because here's the thing with social media nowadays as well, it's like we have to be very discerning of like the difference between consumption and creativity. Like what I felt honestly was just overwhelm with just this, what I was being taught. And like I was mentioning earlier, because I am an astrologer, I know that a big part of my makeup, my personality is very Sagittarian, which is very passionate about seeking wisdom and knowledge. And Sagittarius is also the traveler, the seeker, the adventure person. So I've always, I can remember the first time I traveled abroad and I was inspired by my mom's travels to Venezuela. But I remember thinking to myself since I was younger, like I've always had this desire to travel and get to know people different from myself. And that is essentially like what I truly feel in another, if I'm going deeper into like my own, like the roots of how this all inspired me to leave, was recognizing like I had been to different cultures. I connected with different people. During COVID, for example, like I was connecting with people from Uganda. Like I was connecting with different kinds of energy of like from around the world. And I realized like, wow, like I'm connecting with people having dance parties on Facebook and Zoom with people that are completely in different regions of the world, different economic status, have different, just there's difference. And that's the thing where a big part of why I am the way that I am today is like, I truly believe freedom is the culture of embracing difference. Because if you can't embrace difference, that's where the herd mentality is really easy to be in, where it's almost like everyone is trying to be the same person. And that's essentially, if I'm going back to my experience at Bethel, it was like, we're being taught this information. I've heard it, and then it's being taught in multiple ways. But at the end of the day, like there is also this deep desire of like, who am I? Who am I? Like there's also that self-individuation amongst like the collective. So it's like, it's both and. It's both knowing that, yes, like unity consciousness, if I'm thinking about the church at large is not unity consciousness. Because if you're trying to be friends with somebody or connect with someone that's different from you, you're not going to try to conform them. You will actually meet them where they're at and be curious. Ask them questions of like, oh, wow. Or not even ask questions, but observe them.
But what about, well, yes, I mean, and there is a good amount of observation, but like, I always thought the purpose of a missionary was eventually to bring them the good news and to try to get them to, if not adopt, at least learn about Christianity.
Well, what I'm trying to allude to is that, yes, as I did mission work.
There was also observation. I mean, a lot of what we know anthropologically about a lot of cultures was the notes taken down by the missionaries. So they were absolutely observers, but there was also like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like the preaching element of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've done mission work as a Christian, ex-Christian. I did a lot of that. I mean, I went to Peru. I've been to the Holy Land. Like, I've been there. I've been to even Tijuana. Like, I have served, and I think there's good elements to the whole like going out and connecting and like being of love and service. Of course, like absolutely. I think that's wonderful. It's like volunteering, right? But personally, and this is where I noticed in my own awareness, when you're trying to change someone's belief, it's essentially you're indoctrinating someone into a set of belief systems. And what I've learned coming outside of Christianity is like the self-agency, the autonomy of creating my own ethos, creating my own way of living. And that is a threat because
I was going to say, careful there.
Well, no, it's like we're given the whole, the 10 Commandments. I mean, to this day, the 10 Commandments are very much for many people, it's like you follow this, you follow the rule book. And yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, even in the process of deconstruction that I've been on over the last, years now, it's still a refining process because it's reclaiming my sovereignty, reclaiming my truth, not declaring things from a place of people pleasing or fear of not belonging. It's more of a like, no, this is my truth because I live this truth. I embody it. I walk it. I'm not trying to make you like me. I'm not trying to make you, be part of this group. No, I'm just living. I'm just living my life. And if you happen to enjoy my vibration and my vibe, awesome. Like, that's how I feel, honestly, Andre. Like, I feel how Jesus was. Like, Jesus was just his vibe, and the way he talked was the vibe. People liked what he had to say.
He was just being him. We put him on a pedestal.
And that's the thing about pedestals. It's like, what if instead of like exalting this like person, blah, 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 blah. And I'll be honest too. Like, I look up to a lot of people in the sense of like what these women stand for. I could see the God in you. I could see the God, the powerful Lilith. I can see powerful Mary Magdalene. Like, there's so much I can like embrace and like honor in all of you, but it's also recognizing like, I know me, and that's the gift that I love. Like, no one can take that from me. It's powerful. It really is powerful.
So speaking about women that didn't want to take a husband or get married, I mean, that was Mary Magdalene's story. Her dad literally tried to drown her because she refused to take a husband. And she knew she was destined for something more. We've spoken about it in prior episodes, the Holy Grail, right? The womb, the bloodline, right? Except we know from the Templar teachings, it's not the bloodline of Jesus Christ. It's actually the bloodline of Mary Magdalene that they're the most interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was a special man, of course, but he was a very carefully chosen, very carefully vetted, and very carefully trained consort and protector for her. She's actually the source of the magic. And there is amongst these texts, there is a gospel of Mary Magdalene. Yeah. Because she was one of the disciples. In fact, she was the most favored of the disciples. She was Jesus's chosen successor and the first one he appeared to, if we are to believe the stories after the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so we shouldn't overlook her importance.
Yeah, I mean, the Holy Grail is the womb. And as a womb priestess, high priestess, I feel it is very much the gateway into the deeper mysteries of what Jesus was really alluding to. And you know what I've learned through, Mary Magdalene and her wisdom and her being the oracle that she is that until we have a direct connection with our womb and our cyclical nature and the mysticism of that, we're not going to be able to understand and experience what is absolutely needed right now, which is a balance between these energies, between the masculine and feminine in society. And more than ever, my heart breaks. My heart breaks for women who are in these institutions that are completely shutting down out of fear, especially around their sacred sexuality, because it's really tied down to the womb being inflamed. This is why women have cysts and issues around their menstrual cycles.
Absolutely.
It's because women as a whole in these institutions have forgotten what it's like to be cyclical and haven't yet discovered the mystery of seeing your menstrual cycle as this magical experience.
No, you're taught to be ashamed of it like it's an inconvenience.
And that shame is really heavy for many of you, I know. I know because I was one of them. And I honestly think it's a miracle that I'm here today, because I know how afraid so many people, especially if you're just leaving the church, how isolating and scary that feels, because everything you thought you knew is challenged, and you know something's off and you're following that, and it feels like you're going through a tunnel and you're barely seeing the light at the end of it. And I just want to say to you, if you are on that path, that you're so brave, and I see you. And it's interesting because I really feel Mary Magdalene's heart right now, especially with my womb. And the thing about Mary Magdalene is she was a guardian of the womb. And she with Jesus taught him about the mysteries of the womb. And she taught him how to understand the sacredness that is sacred sexuality, the sacredness of life, the sacredness of vitality, the sacredness of earth medicine. She was a medicine woman. She understood that she was not only by Jesus' side, she was very wealthy. She was a steward of money, of wealth for all of disciples and Jesus. And what we're seeing is a pandemic of, I believe, what is women inside of the church not realizing that there are womb priestesses. I remember talking about it earlier. I remember when I was in that church, 2 churches I've been involved in, where I literally was part of talking and healing women around cysts and fallopian tubes being not working properly, and then me just being in people's presence would heal them. And I didn't know it at the time that I was a womb priestess. I didn't have the words, but I know that this path has called me ever since I was a little girl. When I was in kindergarten, I was saying I wanted to be an OBGYN, and an OBGYN is one who bursts beings into this world, literally catches them. And so I've always been attuned to the womb. And I even was, as a little girl on TLC, would watch the show TLC Birth Story. And I was fascinated that like 2 humans could create something, like another human. And I didn't know at the time it was like sex. I had no idea. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you have the feeling deep within to understand your sacred sexuality, you are like a rebel that has a voice and you want to find it, and you're just like with without shame, I'm going to move through that shame and I'm going to alchemize it. I'm going to transmute it. And it's going to become my message eventually. Like, yes, that's me, like I've been on that path for years now, and it's worth it. It's a worthwhile journey, because here's the thing, like, you are worthy of getting to know yourself without the need to adopt the programs and the expectations that other people or the Bible has projected upon you. Like, I want you to see I invite you to see yourself as you are creating your own ethos, like Bible or whatever means to loving yourself code. And if you are meeting Andre and I at this time, it's I truly believe for a reason. And I know with right now, especially if what's really gripping my heart, Andre, right now is like, I think Trump earlier last week, he was talking about basically creating like a task force to make sure that Christian doctrine was
adhered to, and that basically policing anything that's different. And here's full circle what we've been talking about. There's beauty in difference. There's beauty in diversity. There's beauty in recognizing, oh, wow, like this person's completely different than me, but oh, wow, I'm going to get to know them anyways, or I'm going to allow myself to get to know someone that comes from a different, socioeconomical status, whatever. Like, and I just want to encourage you, like, in this time, like, especially leaving the church, like, there's been times where I felt like depressed, like anxious, of like, whoa. Even in the times that we're in where our president is trying to throw fireballs, trying to instill fear and all these things, like, just encourage you to just be in your heart, connect to love as much as possible by loving yourself. Well, fear is what they feed on. Fear is what they want. Beyond the words, beyond the rhetoric, beyond even the scenes we see play out, it's an energy imbalance and an energy conflict that's going on. You said it. Your heart cries out to the women that are in this institution. And I want to speak into that a little bit, because we discussed the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. It wasn't until a different council, almost 250 years later, 585 AD, they were having debates as to whether women even had a soul. We think it's ridiculous now that they're debating whether or not women should be allowed to be clergy.
Yeah.
Right. They were debating whether or not women even had a soul. Right. And it wasn't until 1919 that women got the right to vote. And you spoke about, this morality police, right? You're not Christian enough. That starts to sound a little bit like the Spanish Inquisition, because whose definition of Christianity is it? Because we've been describing what we know historically about the teacher named Yeshua, and it paints an entirely different picture. It paints a picture of exactly the type of person they're trying to deport now. There's not only that decree that came out today. Next week, and I urge you guys, I'll put it in the show notes, a link to find out who your representative is in the House of Representatives. Call them and tell them you stand against the SAVE Act, because this is what they're voting on when you're going to be hearing this sometime during the week. It's HR 22. Look it up. It says that in order to vote in the future, you have to show your original birth certificate and your current passport. A driver's license isn't good enough, so everybody has to get a passport. And to get a passport, you have to declare one of two genders, even though biology tells us there's at least 6 through the combinations of XY chromosomes. But you have to present a passport, which you have to choose a gender in order, gender assigned at birth in order to get. But here's the kicker. The name on the birth certificate has to match the name on the passport, or you won't get to vote.
It's called manipulation.
How many married women have the name they were born with? And who is this act really targeting?
Yeah.
It is putting control of the voting in the hands of the men and in the hands of the husbands on behalf of their wives. And that's like really scary Handmaid's Tale type stuff, frankly. So, if you're listening, I hope you'll check the liner notes and call your... It's in the House. They have a chance to stand against it. It'll easily pass the Senate if it goes that far. So now is where we take a stand and stop some of this stuff. Perhaps because you're a person of empathy and compassion. But especially, I would say, if you call yourself a Christian. Because we've been discussing this whole show what Christian values are. And I agree, a good amount of them were taught to Jesus, who we revere probably by his partner, Mary Magdalene. Not probably, but most definitely. If you really live by the teachings, then recognize when some people aren't, even if those people are your leaders and are using the name that you've come to love to justify what they're doing.
Yeah. If we want a free society, you have to empower everyone.
And not limit people and shame them and burn books. And
our world would be really off if there was just one.
The Smithsonian
all men
just got
or just all women.
The Smithsonian was just ordered to purge all of their archives and exhibits of anything deemed to be un-American.
Yeah, it's interesting times, and that's why I'm honestly, there's just it's
yeah.
It's a really interesting space. It's like even my womb, it's inflamed right now. It's because I could feel this collective this is not even just about women. It's about men not having been initiated by their fathers into manhood and how to understand themselves, and women not being initiated by the mothers into their menstrual cycles and understanding their own sexuality. And it's honestly the lack of resource and education. I mean, the reason why I started to educate myself around sexuality in response to purity culture was because of sexual abuse. I was like, what? It was because I decided to access education, despite there being an abstinence of it, is because I was able to rise out of the indoctrination. And then how many times did I break down and feel like I was dying, realizing the truth? I mean, literally, so many verses that they say, and when you're inside of in the church, it's the truth shall set you free. Well, let me tell you, the truth will break you down.
John 8:32.
The truth is, and this is the thing, it's I think the truth, when you understand, when you see the illusion of the Matrix, your heart you probably feel numb at first, but everything dissolves. It's this undoing that it's just, it's an invitation to completely surrender. And I think that's what we can bring to this moment. Honestly, the only thing you really can control is you. How you show up for you. Yeah. How are you taking care of your body? How are you taking care of your finances? How are you talking to yourself? How are you communicating with your partner? How are you communicating with your friends? Is this a time of solitude, or is this an extroverted time for you? Is it introverted, extroverted? What is this season for you? And honestly, one of the guiding, insightful information that, codes, languages that I've found so helpful in this time is astrology. But more than astrology, it's been my intuition, my gut, knowing myself, trusting myself. And in the church, did I trust myself? Yes and no.
The church teaches you, I feel, to hand over your power to some other authority figure, whether that's the priesthood, whether that's the Godhead.
Yeah. Do you know how many times I've had people, male pastors from my past, reach out to me and say, I'm praying for you, without any context, but just praying. And it's
do you see the judgment inherent in that statement?
Yeah, and I actually had the audacity to respond to him and let him know.
I mean, they're inferring that you need praying for, that whatever you're doing, you're somehow on the wrong path, and without their divine intervention or the divine that they claim to be able to summon, you'll be totally lost.
Yeah, I was pretty edgy that day. I ended up responding with a, well, if I'm going to or give ode to the goddesses that I look up to, like Lilith and Mary Magdalene and the Whore of Babylon, and in retrospect, like if you can like pray for me in your name of your god, I mean, I have goddesses that
I would like to invoke too. Yeah,
I still think back, I'm like, was that too much? But I was like, I finally said my truth. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, I was also inspired by somebody else, but
you showed me the email. I was quite proud of you. You actually said whore. She actually said whore in the email.
Well, it's dark feminine.
Which is nothing bad. Whore means sacred cave where they used to go to pray. Like, I can't imagine a priest actually having a problem with that word.
Anyways,
if they're a man of their word.
Yeah.
It's a sacred place to pray.
Yeah. Speaking of Mary Magdalene, and this is the last thing I'm just feeling led to bring up, is like, if you're interested in learning more about the history, that will kind of like give you some grounds to kind of like see what history has expressed to us, because history is history, right? It's in the books. If we look back in history, you can see patterns, and I really encourage anyone to look at just type it in Google, Magdalene laundries. Because what's happening, and it's interesting because I know you've mentioned to me like the Handmaid's Tale. I'm pretty sure they have like a finale coming up, and like I saw a video on a reel of like a bunch of women like walking to some capital or something. I just really encourage people to educate themselves if you haven't already taken those steps. But in the Magdalene laundries, it's really, really intense. But I will preface in saying, like, if you feel like you are an outcast, someone that thinks differently, perhaps feels like a rebel with a cause, or maybe a rebel that's trying to find a cause, welcome. You're in good company. And
not just that, you're the reason we do this show. Really?
Yeah. And also too, even regardless of everything that's going on in the world, like, choose joy. Try to find your joy and build a life that is so amazing that you arrive to it every single day. And it might not always be easy, but the path forward is the path through, right? And if you're just now deconstructing, been in the process, like, I know how intense that process can feel. Know that you can come to Andre and I, reach out to us, come to this talk show. Know that there's a group of us that have left or chosen a different life for ourselves, and that's the beauty of life. Like, we're all here to evolve and grow. And if you decide to step beyond what you've known, it's okay. It's okay to take a step. And yeah, I believe in you.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
One thing I know about Jesus is he hated to be put on a pedestal, actually. There's the part that says, bow down and worship me. That's the only way to heaven. But then there's the other part that says, heaven is here on earth. Heaven is within all of us. We definitely know how he felt about organized religion. I agree with you. He was just walking around being him. People started to follow him. That wasn't his fault. He offered a grain of truth that they weren't getting anywhere else. And you're right. That made him dangerous. That made you dangerous. Right?
Yeah, I know.
Your pastor spoke to you and told you to stop influencing his flock.
Yeah.
Flock is what we call sheep, right?
Well,
a flock is what we call sheep.
Yeah, I was going to a church in Los Angeles, and he was feeling uncomfortable about some things that I was representing, which was helping women around their womb and the conversation around relationships. And yeah, I actually realized in that time that I felt codependent on the church, and I actually brought this to someone I was working with at the time, and it was like, yeah, this is a red flag. And it was just like, absolutely, I'm leaving. And
what was the red flag specifically?
the red flag of just like exactly that. The whole like calling the attendees sheep. Like,
okay. You picked up on that.
Yeah, I just picked up on the nuance of that and just the language of the message. It was just like, oh man, like I just have devoted all my time to this. And like, because I'm talking about relationships, sexuality, I mean, I literally had an like associate pastor meet me for coffee and was like, can you tell me more about the sexuality stuff? Like, I'm not.
Oh, you piqued their interest.
Yeah, I did pique the interest.
Okay.
I mean, I ended up leaving regardless, but yeah, it was just a turning point. I mean, the months later is when like I really had my Saturn return upheaval, and the universe was like, yeah, you're done. You're done with the Christian world. And
Well, I hate to say it. I mean, you know, Jesus felt the same way. That's why we have the story of him
my flipping of
the
the tables.
And it was outside of a temple.
Mm-hmm.
It was outside the temple. Anybody that wants to look that up, it's Matthew 21, 12 through 13, and then it's repeated in Mark 11, 15 through 18. Yeah. He was turning the tables of the marketplace outside of the temple, and he was saying there's no God, nothing divine to be found here.
Yeah. Well, when you realize that's in yourself.
The problem is with any institution, any system, any church, after it goes on for so long, its doctrine becomes the most important thing. Not what inspired the doctrine, but the doctrine itself. And its function becomes to self-perpetuate, to keep perpetuating. That's why, that's why you don't use birth control, because the more babies, the merrier. That's why you send out missionaries. The more converts, the merrier. It's like the system becomes about feeding the system, and less about the message that it was originally created to spread.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, most of the works that we found in the Nag Hammadi texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls speak into exactly this: self-knowledge, self-empowerment. Okay. Jesus himself said, "He that believeth, even greater miracles than I shall perform." That's one of my favorite quotes from the Bible. That's John 14:12. Even greater miracles than I shall you perform. He wasn't saying bow down and worship me. He was saying rise up, be like me. We all have the spark of the divine in us. Why don't you learn what I'm doing and go perform some miracles of your own? Like, we all have this possibility. We know today we use 5 to 10% of our brains at a time.
Yeah, if we really knew the fullness of our capacity.
Of what we're actually capable of when we're not restricted by this shame and division of always being at war with ourselves. Yes.
Yeah. It's just exhausting. It's exhausting to be at war with yourself, and this is why a big part of what I'm passionate about is seeing people love themselves again. Why a big part of, not only my work, but your work of like helping people see their souls, like helping them really awaken their hearts, like remove the veil, like and see through it.
Because heaven is right here. It's right in front of you. It's not in a different place. It exists on a different frequency.
Well, it is that wonder, like the childlike wonder that I know I learned even in the innocence aspect of the Bible. And
when you daydream, when you drift off, you go there. You go to the same place that monks go. After chanting and meditating and praying, that's the same place you go. I liken it to a radio. Okay. You turn a radio to a certain frequency, you hear a certain music, it sets a certain mood. You turn the knob, it goes to a different frequency. You hear a different music, different mood. You're still in the same room. You haven't gone anywhere. But it feels different because you change the frequency. When you do meditation, when you do breath work, when you do some of these tantric and even sexual exercises, what happens is your frequency begins to shift. So the layer of reality that you experience is a different one. It's no different than the radio. You're turning your own dial. That's what a lot of these energetic practices are designed to do. Shift your dial.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ is not a last name. It's a description. It means Christed one. It means one who's achieved Christ consciousness, who's connected to Christ consciousness, all knowing.
Mm-hmm.
The Eastern Buddhists would say all is one consciousness. You're plugged into that radio frequency and receiving that signal, that direct download from the divine. That's what Christed one means.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So if he was during the missing years wandering in the East and learned some of these tantric, meditative, yogic practices, of course he was a master of energy and able to tune into this energy, and that's why they called him the Christed one. You see, it starts to make sense when you have the context.
Yeah.
And that's what the Nag Hammadi texts provide, is that context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting the more, since like leaving Christian, like the institution, I feel like this is actually the path of perhaps what it was always about. Like what Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, 40 nights. Like it's a real confrontation with yourself. And honestly, I'll be honest with you, I don't think in the church I was fully confronting myself. I was coasting. It's easy to coast inside of those walls. There's a safeguard. You're surrounded by people. You're surrounded by your peers. You're surrounded by people who have your back, or at least perceive you have that perception. But there's nothing more, I feel, spiritual than when you're confronted with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is the path. Like when you're just in the shadows of your own inner world. I mean, honestly, like the most profound moments I've had since leaving Christianity have been alone. By myself. Acknowledging how I talk to myself and how shitty it sounds sometimes. How I'm judging myself, how my self-talk's not at the most loving frequency. And being like, ooh,
you were sinning against yourself, by definition.
No.
Judging.
Well,
the original sin.
No, I don't want to attach that even to it.
Okay.
It's just awareness. Because even like this whole, what is language?
Well, language is spelling, actually. That's why language is so, so important.
You want to know what I have found? A spiritual silence.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. I wonder if I'll receive this information when I go to the next dimension, but how many words I've been preached at.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment that stopped, gets quieter over time. Then what are you left with? The void.
The spaces in between.
Nothing.
The liminal spaces.
Where you are literally in this place of like yourself.
Well, that is
your
meditation.
Soul. Yeah. I mean, even when I meditate, to me, like dancing's a meditation, but honestly, you can just put your like a blindfold on, put some music on, and just go into that space. Like that's how I go into that. Or in those moments right before I'm going to bed where I'm like, ooh, like I'm about to go into the next dimension in my sleep time. Or I'm waking up and I'm like you're calibrating, you're hearing some thoughts about your dream. You just had a dream with this person, like, you mentioned the mystics, right? You mentioned, what's the group's called?
The Essenes.
The Essenes. Like, I identify as the Tantric mystics. So it's like, I feel like the mystical path is one of just this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And that to me feels like the journey ahead for, I feel, many people.
Ooh.
Not only just for many people, but it's when you're attuned to spirit, to higher consciousness, you're aware, and it's like you're able to be aware and just be grounded in that. And not like the journey I've been on is like learning how to be less reactive. I'm not perfect. I have moments where like, my body is taking a hit from the outside world because I'm so sensitive to the energies. But when I get into that pocket of I am who I am, like I get that verse now. It's like a lived thing. I am who I am. Like there's no need to prove. There's no need to just justify my embodied way of living. It's just like I am. Like
So let me repeat that famous teaching.
Mm-hmm.
There is no way into heaven except through me.
Me, like yourself.
Through understanding me. He's not talking about himself like an egotist. You gotta come through me. I'm the gatekeeper.
But that's how the majority of Christians think.
Except through me until you understand what me means.
Well, what is me?
What is me? Is it this bag of flesh and bones and muscle and nerve endings and tendons and fluids and stuff?
I mean, it decomposes or you go into the fire. Like
that's
me?
All
our destiny.
So is that me? What is me? When you meditate and you're sitting there, this is one of my favorite exercises. It's so simple, it's so profound. You sit there and meditate, and then you step with your consciousness outside your body so you can observe yourself meditating.
Yeah.
So who is that sitting there meditating, and who is that doing the observing? And which of you is, quote unquote, me?
Yeah. I'd like to introduce the little bit more mystical, like just another layer. And this is something you've been studying for a while, and like I have been trained in as well, is astrology. And I would like to dance with that and how it relates to like the dance of the ego death, which I know we were talking about this last night of.
Well, the death and rebirth, right?
Right, which is what we're all about. It's the sacred portals of transitions. It's what shamans do. It's what where so many people are afraid to walk through is their own death, because death is unconsciously for many what people are afraid of. Anyways.
So what's the astrological layer?
Yeah. So what I've learned is the ego is everyone's personal sun sign. So in realm of astrology language, there's certain parts of every year that are led by a certain zodiac sign. Like I am born January 17th, so my sun sign's in Capricorn, right? So the ego represents the sun. It represents your external, the sun energy, how you express yourself. It's your ego,
the
essentially.
Solar chakra.
Right. It's very much
self and will.
Self and will. And so the ego is not necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's important to know yourself. But what I've learned with like the concept of ego and ego death is that, and this is something I've learned as an astrologer, and the more I get to know myself, this concept of attachment and suffering. And maybe we could talk about this a little bit of the concept of what actually does happen when someone leaves what they know in their identity. And how that, for example, for me, in leaving Christianity, that identity began to die. Like it literally began to unravel itself. And then I was left with nothing. It felt like, well, who am I? And then I was realizing you taught me this. I mean, honestly, I learned so much from you. You helped me through so much of that transition and still do. But it's like the attachment.
We help each other.
Yeah, well, it's that whole thing of like attachment, right? And suffering.
Well,
can you speak into that? Like,
well, I mean, it's something I spoke into it in a prior episode. It's something I know well. I got to experience it twice in my life. Once when I got my DNA test back that I bought myself for my birthday. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Russia. My parents are Russian.
Yeah.
Their grandparents are Russian. Their great-grandparents are Russian. They're from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And my DNA test comes back 0% Russian.
Yeah.
And I'm not adopted. They swear, and I believe them.
Yeah.
So somebody somewhere along the line immigrated. We live in Russia, but we're not actually Russian. We came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that was the first identity shift. You know, I owe so many people so many apologies now. Because all throughout high school, everybody's like, you look Italian. I'm like, I'm not Italian, I'm Russian. They're like, but you look Italian. I'm not Italian, I'm Russian. Turns out I'm like
Yourself.
75% Roman.
Got it.
25% Egyptian.
Yeah. So your self-concept was being challenged. Your belief about yourself and other
it just
people's
evaporated and became something else in the span of a minute.
That, like, there's no shame. Like, you get to release that, but you were essentially guarding what you defined as you. And I get it.
I had no reason to doubt it.
And I get it. Like, when you start to create, and this is the thing, after like an ego death, like, you get to rebuild that. But it's interesting. It's really an interesting thing, because there's this concept of flow and just flowing with life. And there's a dance between, like, yeah, like, I know myself, but there's also what I truly believe is this dance of neuroplasticity. And I maybe get geeky with me on this, but I feel like this is a neuroplasticity conversation as well. Because I feel if you're constructed and you're in a dogmatic paradigm and you're not easily able to receive other information, your neural network pathway is confined to a certain mindsets, emotions, and beliefs. And unless you get outside of that ecosystem and are challenged to think maybe differently, or ask maybe you're asked a question and you're prompted to go deeper. Like, unless you get outside of the hive, you will be in the network of what is all around you. And this is the concept too that I've adopted for millionaires, for example, or like millionaire mindsets. It's like, if you're in a room where you feel like that you're the smartest, or like, you've learned the thing, get into a different room and become a beginner. And that's honestly at the foundation of so much of what my journey was realizing, like, I've been in this since I was pre-K to 29. That's a long time. That's like 27 years of my life. That's a lot of devotion. I think I get it. Not that I fully get it, but I felt like I devoted so much. But even that, the universe was like, there's more, and you're not going to find it in the church. I got the whisper. You're going to find it in understanding your womb. And I was like, what? There's so much to that. I mean, honestly, that could be a totally different episode.
So the second one was, and you'll appreciate this, the zodiac. Because in Russia, we don't use AM, PM. We have a 24-hour clock.
Yeah.
And, some things like your ascendant change every 10 minutes. So
yeah,
the AM and PM was mixed up on my birth certificate in the translation.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's crazy.
So then a year after my heritage nationality shifted, my zodiac shifted too. Yeah. So I just got used to identity being something that's convenient in the moment. You need some way to define and describe yourself when asked, but it can shift on a dime without warning, and it's okay when it does. It's like,
yeah. I mean, you were talking about the observer. That's what astrology does. It helps you become the observer of yourself.
Okay.
But even with the observer, it's like, what I've learned in looking at my chart, for example, it's an act of compassion and empathy to know yourself, to really know yourself and understand, for example, what your inner world, the cosmos, are reflecting in your inner world, because you are the universe. You are it. You
what
are
might
heaven.
Have caused you to feel
you
a
are heaven
particular
on
way,
earth. It is. It's not out there. You are it.
You know what a neat exercise is in that regard? Like, so many of us are like, oh, I'm triggered. I'm angry in this moment. Oh, I'm feeling happy. Oh, I'm feeling... Why am I feeling triggered in this moment?
Putting words to it
would be a very helpful exploration. And even, why am I feeling so elated and happy in this moment? What was it that made me totally lose all awareness of myself and be so present in this beautiful moment? if we asked more questions like that and like,
Yeah.
not just, oh, I'm experiencing this emotion, but why?
I've heard it from a personal psychic.
Mm.
The voices in your head are very much your past, present, and future self, your highest self.
Mm.
When I heard that from a psychic, one of my teachers, I was like,
Well put.
oh, wow. Because at the end of the day, it's you and you. You're you and you. I mean, it is. And that can be
it's all
really
you.
terrifying because if we all decided to face our fullest of selves, our unconscious made conscious, which as you and I both know, like maybe 5% of the brain is working in conscious form. 95%.
And those aren't estimates, by the way. We know that from like MRIs, like actual neurological scans and mapping.
Yeah. And so it's like that 95% is unconscious. And like Carl Jung says, if you don't make it conscious, you'll call it fate. I thought I was going to be Christian my whole life, like seriously. And then my soul was like, nope, course correct. We're going to the next level. You're going to have to lose everything in order to rise into the next thing. Seriously. And I'm so glad I did because, wow, yes, stars.
So I'd like to touch on a few other things that history records that Jesus did during his travels.
Oh, okay.
Feeding the poor.
Mm-hmm.
He was very big on feeding the poor.
Mm-hmm.
There's several passages that speak into this.
Yeah.
The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Proverbs 22:9. Invite the poor, the lame, the blind.
Yeah.
Luke 14:12-24. Like I think of like the mega galas at Mar-a-Lago nowadays compared to, invite the poor, the lame, and the blind. That's who he liked to hang out with.
Yeah.
No judgment at all, just compassion, connecting human to human. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it. Hebrews 13:2. I think that's a beautiful one.
I think I know where you're headed with this.
Well, strangers, okay? Strangers kind of brings up
Yeah,
immigration.
I was kind of feeling where you're headed with that.
The Bible specifically addresses immigration, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Leviticus 19:33-34. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them.
Mm-hmm.
The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born.
Yeah.
Love them as yourself, for you were once foreigners in Egypt.
The reason why this is not happening, why people like loving your foreigner is not happening.
It does not say deporteth them, for thou shalt stealeth your job.
I mean, yeah. It's because at the core, there's a lack of self-love. Because if you don't love yourself, you will have a deep desire to control others, to feel powerful. It's a power play. Power play dynamics is what is a way to fill a void that's related to you being afraid to face yourself. And it's usually inner child wounds because you weren't seen as a kid or XYZ, you were bullied. So
rather than looking at your own potential flaws, not that they're flaws, they're just unique characteristics that make you you.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the term neurodivergent because I've never met any two souls or brains that are identical unless they were identical twins. And even then there were subtle differences.
Yeah.
Who's divergent from who and from what? What is the norm? We are all different. We are all unique. These are just characteristics that make you you.
Mm-hmm.
There need not be, here again, that sin, judgment attached to it.
Yeah.
It's
there's a difference between a discernment and like having discernment and I feel judgment. It's also like when you look at someone and you're just like, oh my God, like why would they do that? Like it's so weird, like Like, even I'll want to say as well, like, where people are is where they are. And there's something really sacred about that as well that I've come to appreciate. And you've helped me understand this too. It's like, yes, there are people that are still identifying as Christian, even people that are very close, in my blood family. But I hold reverence of like, and you've helped me see this of like, they're on their own path. They're on the path. And it's made me really understand where perhaps judgment comes from. And it's interesting because I've had to check myself as well, like on my path of awakening of like, I'm merely here just to share and be a vessel of love and authenticity. And however that impacts you is on you. And I have no need to change you because you are you and I am me and we're all connected. And, it's so nice to be in the place where self-acceptance and collective, like appreciation. I mean, I think that's at the core of it. Like when you love yourself, you can also extend that love to another and you can appreciate like, oh my gosh, like I love your style. I love your accent. Where are you from? Like, it's so cool.
You mean compassion for another?
Yeah.
Loving your fellow human being, even if they
Yeah.
were born in a different land from you.
Yeah.
There's one more quality that's commonly attributed to him. Healing the sick.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 10:8, I'll turn to for this one. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, and cast out demons.
Mm.
Oh, but surely he didn't do it for free. I mean, we're not talking about universal health care. Like, that's a very liberal idea. The next passage is, freely you have received and thus freely give. So it actually specifies for free. Heal the sick who need it for free.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like this picture of who they say Jesus wants you to be. Obedient, pious, not questioning authority, being their sheep. And then there's the actual story of this man wandering the countryside, healing the sick for free, feeding the poor, rebelling against the church and the state, welcoming immigrants and foreigners. And like, it's so different than what is portrayed by the Christian fundamentalists, by the Christian nationalists today, by the MAGA heads. Like, the definition of a cult is you have a central figure that you worship, that there's a set of doctrines and rules that thou shalt not question. And if you question or stray from those rules, part 3 of a cult is you will be ostracized.
Yeah.
Like, that describes the evangelicals, that describes the Pentecostals, that describes the new reformist, what are they called? New apostle reformists. They're like the most dangerous sect. Like,
I've also heard though that like there's inclusivity in certain groups as far as churches. Like I've heard there's LGBTQ plus at churches that are very empowering of the community. I'm aware of that. Just as something to consider. I know that's what I've.
And that's, yeah.
Yeah, there's a spectrum, I would say.
That's great. And I guess that's all I'm saying is, we're not here to knock Christianity, but if you are moved by the life and the teachings of Yeshua, then study his life and study all his teachings and see where that leads you. Don't be selective about it. We started this program reading personality descriptions that were actually definitions of words. I'd like to bring it full circle and read one more that stands out to me. And you tell me if that kind of fits the man that we've been describing the past hour. A state of awareness achieved by sensitive individuals who have empathy for the plight of others, especially those suffering from injustice and or oppression. Somebody who's empathic, astute, perceptive, thoughtful, and insightful. Fits the man we've been describing? Doesn't fit?
Yeah.
That is the definition of woke. The slang term woke. since when did it become a derogatory word? That's the definition that I just read, was the definition of woke.
Mm.
Hate to break it to you.
Mm. It's wild because I'm like, I get Jesus. I feel like very intimately
Well, when you
aware of
strip
him.
away so much of the dogma and the authoritarian
What's left with
language,
you?
he's very human. He makes a lot of sense. He's very relatable.
That's, I think, also too, because we're in divine union, I can understand more of the nature of Mary and Yeshua. Because we express to each other that we're divine. But I also see our shadows. I also see our wounds. And I also see, ooh. And yeah, I've seen your humanity. And that's why I'm like, wow, like we help each other in relationship. And I think that's why there's so much emphasis, I feel like, with Mary Magdalene of her involvement. And yeah, all to say, this has been a fun episode. Really intense. I've like cried. I feel, oh, it's a wild time, but
you made it through.
Yeah.
Like a champ. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. And please know, I want to, also mention this disclaimer, like we're not here to tell anybody what to think. That's what they do. We're just presenting some historical facts, some tidbits, and some thoughts and observations. What you do with that, we trust you to do.
Ooh, that's good.
That's up to you and you. We're just here to present information. So thank you for taking time out of your busy day to listen to us. And yeah, love. The antidote to fear, you guys, is love.
Yeah. Connect with your inner child.
Mm-hmm.
Receive support if you need space to be held for you, to just let it out. A journal's great. Put on a song that makes you think of your inner child and dance to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Breath, sound, movement. Those are the foundations of Tantra.
Yeah. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, please. If we can support you in any way, reach out.
Yeah.
At the Tantric Mystic on Instagram. At Andre Night Awakening on Instagram. And then you can also find us at tantricawakening.net.
Yay. Bye.